The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.
Okay, we're going to start in the step 11, 12 by 12. You want to speak to any of that, Bill, before we get started off?
So the step 11 and the 12 and 12, it's not like one of my go-tos with my sponsees, but it is a go-to with Jesse and his sponsees. We decided to do this a few years ago, go through the 12 and 12, and we've had some good success doing it, but for whatever reason, it's not something I go to as a sponsorship tactic, although I do go to pieces of the step 11. So, a part of this is me learning as we go in this step as well. Jesse's pretty versed in it, and I'm versed in certain aspects, but at the end of the day, it's about prayer and meditation, right? We're just learning more. This is like the big book has the directions, and this book expands on it.
Yeah.
And, I just want to say something. I heard something last night that was really disturbing to me. I was talking to somebody who's been in the program for about a year. She's got a sponsor. She struggled. And then I found out this sponsor did not even take her through the big book. She sponsored her out of the 12 and 12. Did not do the fears or the sex conduct in her step 5. And the person, and how this all came up was they were really afraid to do their amends. And I'm like, of course you're afraid to do the amends. You haven't fucking been humbled enough. You don't even understand step 1, right? So I just really want to emphasize here tonight that the 12 and 12 is not our directions to take us through the book for the spiritual awakening. It is a sidebar book that is a companion that is used to expand on the directions in our recovery. Usually this book is best used after a year or two of being sober. But it's, it can be used earlier than that, but by no means is it a replacement. And so, I hope I run into this person at some point in my life, because I'm just going to call her out on that bullshit, because it just really irritated me. And, we spent a lot of time in the 12 and 12, and I just don't want anyone to mistake that this is the solution over the big book. It helps expand on it. So I'll turn it over to Jesse to give a take on why he uses this and whatever else he wants to say.
Yeah, I'm happy Bill said that. I mean, it's not the first time he said that, nor it's the first time I've said that, nor will it be the last time. Like, even, the 12 by 12 is good for certain steps. I personally do not use it 1 through 3. The big book, I believe, is much more comprehensive, and to add any more to it, I think just waters it down or make a guy's eyes roll to the back of his head. It's good for 4. In my opinion, it's good for 4, 6, 7. It's good for 10 and 11. Then I ended at that. And I think it's complete nonsense for 12. We won't get into that. And I know that I'm pretty sure Bill still feels the same way on that, because we've tried. Me and Bill have read every step there is, front to back. And out of those readings, essentially, is where we really made the decision for ourselves what was going to go into the sponsorship. And then we've added since then. Why I like it for the 10 and the 11, mainly the 11 over the 10, is that it gives a little bit more, it's advanced. Like when Bill says that it's, 1+, I'd say that's pretty accurate. Especially when we read it, it's going to be very advanced. It's going to, it's really talking about your safe space. And it's talking to the reader as if the reader has done it for a little bit of time. It's not much of the blueprints as the big book talks about. The big book gives you the ideal situation is you take the blueprints out of the big book, and then in some time, maybe a couple of months or whatever, then you're able to add the 12 and 12. I do both generally because the 11 is only like maybe an hour and a half conversation. With the 12 and 12, I'm able to give some good value, a little bit of a better insight to make it practical for them. As in, this is where it is, right? With the blueprints, this is where it needs to be, 12 and 12. This is where we want to get to. So I'm able to kind of give them both targets, but of course, still roping them in to the original directions. No matter what I do, it's always the big book for me. That is the single book that is sobered and helped keep me sober to this point. The 12 and 12, especially from a 6 and 7 standpoint, I'd say that the reality is as long as you have those two steps from the 12 and 12, you can almost burn the book. I feel pretty confident in saying that. Those are the two main steps that are necessities. Other than that, everything else is just a little bit more of a deeper learning, right? And so that's what the step 11 is. A little bit more of a deeper learning. Okay, so page 96. Step 11, sought through prayer meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. As we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us, the power to carry that out. Prayer and meditation are a principal means of conscious contact with God. We AAs are active folk enjoying the satisfactions of dealing with the realities of life, usually for the first time in our lives, and strenuously trying to help the next alcoholic who comes along. So it isn't surprising that we often tend to slight serious meditation as prayer, and prayer is something not really necessary. To be sure, we feel it is something that might help us in the occasional emergency, but at first many of us are apt to regard it as a somewhat mysterious skill of clergymen from which we may hope to get a secondhand benefit, or perhaps we don't believe in these things at all. To certain newcomers and to those one-time agnostics who still cling to the AA group as their higher power, claims for the power of prayer may, despite all logic and experience and proof in it, still be unconvincing or quite objectionable. Those of us who once felt this way can certainly understand and sympathize. We will remember how something deep inside us kept rebelling against the idea of bowing before any God. Many of us had strong logic, too, which proved there was no God whatever. What about all the accidents, sickness, cruelty, and injustice in the world? What about all those unhappy lives which were the direct result of unfortunate birth and uncontrollable circumstances? Surely there could be no justice in this scheme of all things, and therefore no God at all. Sometimes we took a slightly different tack. Sure, we said to ourselves, the hen probably did become before the egg, but no doubt the universe had a first cause of some sort. The God of Adam may be hot and cold by turns, but certainly there wasn't any evidence of a God who knew or cared about human beings. We liked AA, all right, and we're quick to say that it had done miracles, but we recoiled from meditation and prayer as abstainingly as the scientists who refused to perform a certain experiment, lest it prove his pet theory wrong. Of course, we finally did the experiment, and when unexpected results followed, we felt different and felt we knew different. And so were we sold on meditation and prayer. And that, we have found, can happen to anybody who tries. It has been well said that almost the only scoffers at prayer are those who never try it enough. Bill?
Okay, so just kind of going back to the top here. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry out step 6 and 7. I really like to emphasize 6 and 7 in this step 11, because really, essentially, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to seek through this prayer meditation to improve my connection with my Creator so I can actually carry out this power of step 6 and 7. And 6 is like learning what God's will and relinquishing the things that I used to make God, such as behaviors and things that drive me that don't actually serve me or you, these defects of character that we talk about. And I'm learning that. And when we're praying, think about your life a lot when you're in recovery. These things that actually cause you the emotional disturbance or that really fucking sidetrack your recovery, we're praying for those things to be gone, or that we're able to work on them or whatever, or we're able to do God's will. And that's essentially what step 11 is. The power to carry out those 2 steps, 6 and 7. And I better clarify here that for anybody new, like step 6 and 7 are quite different, right? 6 is I'm learning God's will through a lot of pain. I've come over a hump. I've gotten a new perspective on what I'm actually doing here. And I have a desire to seek and do God's will. I have a desire to change and actually pack into the stream of life something different. And I don't have a reservation as I move forward. I really want to fucking be a better person, and I want to be of service, and I want to help people, and I want to live this way, not because I have to out of necessity anymore. It's more out of a willingness and a wanting to, because through the process of the 6, you change, and then the God dope starts pulling you, and you just want more of this shit. So that's really important, because once you get into that step 7 area, and you've worked on a lot of these defects, and you're on a new plane, and you're going in a new direction, step 7 really becomes like a power step. It really becomes a place where you can really source some power and really get into your subconscious and change and slow the mind down and do a bunch of different things. Anyway, so prayer and meditation are the principal means of conscious contact with God. Well, typically in the program, it's usually prayer, right? And I'm a huge fan of prayer, but for this moment, I'm going to say prayer gets all the highlights. It's all the headlines in prayer. What about meditation? What about personal inventory? Those things are equally as important as prayer. And when you look at the big book, when you're kind of studying the notes in the big book and how Bill wrote it, typically he talks about self-examination first, almost always. So the self-examination is the most important part to begin with. Then you take it to prayer, and then you go into your meditation. And that is the way that this goes. And the heavy emphasis on inventory is because most of us have never tried it enough. And through the awareness of self-inventory, we can see who and what we are with the willingness to change and become something different, something better, more valuable human being on this planet, right? So let's not slight the inventory in the meditation. And the thing about meditation is there's so many people that have never even given it a chance at all. And I think that it's really important, even if you're new in recovery. And I remember when I was brand new, I just thought meditation was kind of like mysterious, like it said here, and it wasn't really for me. But you know what? After about a year or so, I was like, fuck, it tells me it's part of the program. So I just started doing it. And I did it really shitty. And I would just sit in my own thoughts, and I wasn't really meditating, but I was trying to be quiet, and my mind was still going, but at least I was making an effort. And then after some time, I found out about some YouTube videos, and I learned about guided meditation. I went to this Buddhism 12-step thing. And I think that's where I really started clicking into some meditation, was at this Buddhism 12-step recovery thing where they would sit for 15 minutes. And I was like, fuck, this is kind of cool. And that was the first time that I remember where my mind really did slow down. So I was quick to see where religious people were right. And I threw some shit at the wall, and it started sticking. And from there, over the years, it's grown into something like so valuable in my life. When I'm not meditating, I feel the effects. Like I really feel negative effects of not meditating. So this last week, because I haven't been, like it says here, I would slight it. And I do slight it. It's more important for me to get to bed. It's more important for me to go see somebody, spend time with my girlfriend, go for a drive, go do this, go do that. Like I don't have time for that 15 minutes or 10 minutes or even 5 minutes sometimes. But what ends up happening is I fucking pay the price for that heavily. And at 7 years recovery, I can see, like I've talked about many times, the patterns of sobriety, the patterns in recovery that I couldn't see it even 2 or 3 years in with this meditation. Now, in this last couple of years, I can see when I'm not meditating, I really hurt myself. And if I'm hurting myself, I have more of a chance of hurting others. And I don't want to do that anymore. So I really try to close the gap. And this last week, I've closed the gap. It was funny. I went to a meeting on Monday, and one of my sponsees was there, and he's like, "Holy fuck, Bill, you're really calm tonight. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What am I doing?" And then I thought about it, and I was like, fuck, for the last 4 days, I've really, really ramped up my meditation. And I said, dude, I think it's because I ramped up my meditation again. And I believe that to be true. So I'm going to keep going here. We A's are active folk enjoying satisfactions of dealing with the realities of life, usually for the first time in our lives, and strenuously trying to help the next alcoholic who comes along. That's really important in this. And remember, like, this isn't an 11-step program. Strenuous work with other alcoholics will be the bright spot of your life if you're willing to fucking get over the selfishness hump of working with others. A lot of people will work with others for a little while when they first start, but then it fades away, and then they make the excuses in their head that they got other things to do, or they're not good enough at it, or they don't have the time, or whatever. Working with other alcoholics will enhance your prayers and your meditation. And I like how they mentioned it in the first paragraph here, because it's part of the deal. So it isn't surprising that we often tend to slight serious meditation and prayer. It's something we not really necessary, like I just said. To be sure, we feel it is something that might help to meet the occasional emergency. And I think when I'm getting on with the business of being self-satisfied in my recovery, it's the pain of not doing these things that takes me back to it. And that's part of closing the gap. And I still do that, every now and then. My prayers are decaffeinated, my meditations are weak, my inventory's kind of, not that important, and I end up paying for it, right? So I just want to go to the next page, halfway through that middle paragraph. But we recoiled from meditation and prayer as obstinately as the scientist who refused to perform a certain experiment lest it prove his pet theory wrong. You'll talk on that, right?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay. Of course, we finally did the experiment, and when unexpected results followed, we felt different. In fact, we knew different. And so we were sold on meditation and prayer. And that's what happened to me. It sold me. And I remember, I think I might have mentioned it in earlier episodes, my first time I ever really tried praying, I was on a deep resentment against my ex-wife. My dad and my sponsor both weren't giving me the solution I wanted. They both said pray. I was not fucking happy about it. I did it. Within 2 days, I was fully over the resentment, and I'd forgiven her. And then that was the beginning of me working with prayer and moving along in this program and believing in something. Meditation, like I said, it has changed my life in the last 2 years in ways that I can't even really explain. I think it's so hard to explain some of these spiritual disciplines when they take off into the next level, because I can't really explain to you what happens when I'm in a good mode of meditation. It's almost like I'm in like another world, and my mind is shut off, and I'm in a place where nothing fucking matters, and it really calms my mind. And through the discipline of meditation and prayer and practicing this, like really in my life over the last number of years, I can be in my car and take a minute at the light, and I can just get centered in meditation. I can sit there in a class as I run these groups with the place that I work at, and I can just calm and sit there and get fucking grounded. Like I can do it anywhere at any time. And almost sometimes, dudes, like, I don't even know if this makes sense, but sometimes even as I'm speaking, I feel like I'm not even like there. That's not even like me. And I don't know if that's a state of meditation or it's just, God kind of working through me, but it's kind of like I'm done that session and I give my head a shake and I'm like, holy shit, where did the time go and where was I? Right? And it's just really cool. So, anyone who's, growing and learning, keep practicing meditation. It took me a number of years, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. And it's one of the most beautiful additions to my recovery. And I didn't think it was going to be this important or this impactful in my life. So that's it.
Okay. So we AAs are active folk enjoying the satisfactions of the dealing with realities of life, usually for the first time in our lives, strenuously trying to help the next alcoholic who comes along. So it isn't surprising that we often tend to slight serious meditation or prayer as something not really necessary. And, like Bill had mentioned, that prayer gets a lot of attention because prayer is seen more often through the 12 steps and through the book than meditation is. Meditation is brought up very lightly in 4 in the sex conduct, and then there's a step on it, right? And then you're given the directions and everything. But all throughout the book, you're given certain prayers. Prayer isn't new, as we, as I mentioned on the on our other fucking episode on this, that prayer isn't new. What's new is meditation, right? So of course that's what's going to be focused here. And so he says, with dealing with the realities of life, trying to strenuously help out the next alcoholic, it isn't overly surprising that we slight this, right? And this is always the case. Always is this the case, even for myself. Like Bill had mentioned that he didn't do much meditation, for a week or whatever. That is a part of the process. A part of the process is adhering to the discipline because your ass is on fire. And then taking your foot off the gas pedal and then completely not doing it. And so it does chat about that in this chapter. But what I do want to point out before we move forward is a lot of the way that the 12 by 12 is written is it is written for the reader. Like it is written as if the reader's already 12 stepped, right? So when it says trying to strenuously help out the next alcoholic, that is they are 12 steps through the big book. And then they are reading this, right? And then from there, that makes sense. I mean, I know Bill's a little, like me and Bill both kind of do this. Like there'll be chats about sponsorship maybe on 10, but not taking a guy through the book, but entertaining it, right? Starting to kind of be open to sponsorship around maybe 10, 11. But, once an individual's 12 step, they need the information in the 12, in the big book, right? So this is why we talk about strenuously trying to help out the next alcoholic. It makes sense that the individual is 12 step by the time they're reading this, right? Maybe that's not so important what I'm talking about. What is fucking important is to understand in how the big book's written, especially when you get to the 12 by 12 or the step 12 rather. In the step 12, the big book is written for one individual to sober up off the book itself, right? And so when you read the step 12, it can be fairly outdated without that context, right? So step 11, not so much, but here it does play a part. And so what he's saying is yes, the step says meditation. You're supposed to do meditation. We both know you're not going to fucking do it. This is what he said. The admission is you're supposed to do it. It's a part of the step. We both know you're not going to fucking do it. So the rest of it is to outline different aspects of doing it, what that could look like, advancing, and then also prayer. He does bring up prayer again. Okay, so by this time, to certain newcomers and to those one-time agnostic who still cling to the AA group as their higher power, claims for that power of prayer made despite all logic and experience of proof in it still be unconvincing or quite objectionable. So arrived at this point, if an individual's higher power is still based in the group, the individual will be stunted by that. So again, we're talking about the individual being 12 stepped, then reading the 12 and 12. Then reading the 12 and 12 all the way to step 11. They're saying arrived at that point, the higher power should no longer be the group. It should be grown by this point, or else we're going to run into a gym situation, right? Where he failed to enlarge in his spiritual condition, or that he was drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. Of course, we finally did the experiment, and when unexpected results followed, we felt different. In fact, we knew different. And so were we sold on meditation and prayer. And that we have found can happen to anybody who tries it. It's been well said that almost the only scoffers at prayer are those who never tried enough. And so even when it comes to meditation for a good while of my recovery was an absolute waste of time. And it was a waste of time because I had no idea of step 10 and the presence I would get out of step 10, out of the processes that I needed to follow, the disciplines I needed to follow to even allow me to really entertain proper meditation. And so if I'm not, and for years, and the guys that I sponsored, I have, spent a lot of time in 10 and almost not alienated step 11, chat about meditation, how important it is, blah, 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 but really emphasize the 10. And that's really no good either. I mean, all three of them have to be emphasized, with equal conviction. Because without, even if you just do 10 and you're dealing with a passive aggressive or passive individual, they will pursue the melancholy activity. There'll be no God found in that. And then in turn, no meditation and sure as fuck no sponsorship, right? So for that individual, those two individuals, they're going to be shafted on just that. This is why it needs to be followed up with prayer and meditation. Like even in this page on 96, we're talking about strenuously trying to help out the next alcoholic, as in 10, 11, 12. When I clear the channel in 10, then I source the power immediately after in 11. And then, I act out on those intuitive thoughts found. It is 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, not taken separately. So when saying that, it was only until I understood something of 10, the disciplines in there, that I could even entertain proper 11s. But once I started busting into meditation, like I think me and Bill a number of years ago, we went to a meditation. You remember that guy we were seeing for meditation? We're going to, it was off of Glenmore.
Yeah,
remember
Richard.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember that? And so we did that. My meditation, the time factor, I think I mentioned this before, it was 1 or 2 minutes is where it started. Then I bumped it up to 5. And now it's anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes throughout the day. And that's generally in the morning. Throughout the day, I can meditate roughly about an hour. And that's 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And that's me sourcing the power throughout the day. That's typically what it looks like. If I'm in a meeting, then I fucking meditate the whole meeting. There's nowhere else in my life that I will run into characters and pride to the upteenth degree and fucking attitudes and hear some of the most errant fucking nonsense I'm ever going to hear in my day, in a meeting. So when I'm in a meeting, it's full meditation when I'm listening to people talk and stuff like that. And, even if it's stuff that I want to hear, generally where my meditation started in a meeting was, Bill's talking about 6 and 7, which is accurate. I don't say 6 and 7, it's self, right? A lot of the times when I'm meditating or I'm trying to source the power throughout the day, self is bleeding in, I feel it. Or, maybe I'm making calls and the calls are going south and I know the next call is going to be pretty nasty if it goes south, right? I know that self is going to step in for how inadequate I feel, right? Right now I feel a little bit inadequate. There's going to be cocksureness in the next second. Right. And so a lot of the times that's where the meditation is. So where it started in the rooms is I just did not want self to bleed into these shares. And that's where a lot of my meditation started in the rooms. And then what would happen is as I grew in understanding effectiveness in the book and other literature and in my sponsorship and in my own program experience, I started being able to see much more nonsense as time went on. And so, not only am I praying for me to get some sort of an idea of the share, shut it down, but also, the nonsense that I'm hearing. So where that comes from now, what that looks like for me now is ideally, if let's say we're on step 6 in the room, we've read something, I'm going to pray, meditate. Out of that meditation, I'm going to get a couple bullet points of what I want to share. And then generally, the power will fill in the rest more often than not. So this is how I don't have to think about me or what I'm going to share the whole room. This is like a 5-minute process. Once we start sharing, then that's over. And then from there, I resort to that if I am to be asked to share. So if I go to a meeting that day, there's a good chance I'm meditating probably an hour and a half throughout the day. And like I said, that's an hour, that's, a minute here, that's 2 minutes there, maybe 5 minutes there, whatever the day looks like. And like I shared before, is meditation started on intuitive thought and then rolled to purpose. Once my mind started operating intuitively, where these intuitive thoughts that used to come out of meditation years ago, that's just the way my mind operates, so long as I'm connected to the spirit. That's the big key. And how I get connected to the spirit and open up the channel is 10, 11, 12. Okay, anything else? All right. Those of us who have come to make regular use of prayer would no more do without it than we would refuse air, food, or sunshine. And for the same reason, when we refuse air, light, or food, the body suffers. And when we turn away from meditation and prayer, we likewise deprive our minds, our emotions, and our institutions of vitally needed support. As the body can fail its purpose for lack of nourishment, so can the soul. We all need the light of God's reality, the nourishment of his strength, and the atmosphere of his grace. To an amazing extent, the fact of AA life confirms this ageless truth. There is a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit. But when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. Now and then we may be granted a glimpse of that ultimate reality, which is God's kingdom. And we will be comforted and assured that our own destiny in that realm will be secure for so long as we try, however faultingly, to find and to do the will of our own Creator. As we have seen, self-searching is the means by which we bring new vision, action, and grace to bear upon the dark and negative side of our natures. It is the step in the development of that kind of humility that makes it possible for us to receive God's help. Yet it is only a step. We want to go further. We want the good that is in all of us, even in the worst, to flower and to grow. Most certainly we shall need bracing air and abundance of food. But first of all, we shall need sunlight. Nothing much can grow in the dark. Meditation is our step out into the sun. How then shall we meditate? The actual experience of meditation and prayer across the centuries is, of course, immense. The world's libraries and places of worship are a treasure trove for all seekers. It is to be hoped that every AA who has a religious connection, which emphasizes meditation, will return to that practice of that devotion as never before. But what about the rest of us, less fortunate, who don't even know how to begin? Well, we might start off like this. First, let's look at a really good prayer. We won't have far to seek. The great men and women of all religions have left us with a wonderful supply. Here, let us consider one that is a classic. Its author was a man who for several hundred years now has been rated as a saint. We won't be biased or scared off by that fact, because although he was not an alcoholic, he did, like us, go through the emotional ringer. And as he came out of the other side of that painful experience, this prayer was the expression of what he could then see, feel, and wish to become. Lord, grant me make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. Where there is discord, I may bring harmony. Where there is error, I may bring truth. Where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. Where there are shadows, I may bring light. Where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen.
Okay. Going back to 97, bottom of the page. When we refuse air, light, food, the body suffers. And when we turn away from meditation and prayer, we likewise deprive our minds, our emotions, and our intuitions of vitally needed support. As the body can fail its purpose for lack of nourishment, so can the soul. So that little sentence or two is telling you quite a bit, right? It's telling you that the air, the light, the food, the body suffers if we don't get it. Well, the soul will suffer if we're not kind of focusing on our prayer and meditation. And it is true. And that's what I was explaining on my last little chat at the mic here. I can feel my whole being deprived of a vitally needed, nourishing ingredient in my life. And it's me that's actually slighting it and going away from it because of my own, procrastination and self-centered nature. And over the years, I've worked on closing that gap, but it's still hard, right? And what I love about the vitality, the vitally needed support, is vitality. The word vitality comes from vital also, right? Or vital comes from vitality. And when I'm doing my prayer and meditation and I'm doing my disciplines, my life is better overall. And I'm able to fucking feel like I'm alive and I want to live. And I don't get that when I'm running the show myself, or when I'm doing meditation half-assed and my prayers are really weak and decaffeinated. I don't get that like lifted up feeling in my life. And the thing about me, when I go down the rabbit hole and don't do my meditations, it takes me like some time to get back up and get it going on a regular basis, because now I've got a bunch of shit in there that I need to clear out. So I got to do a bit of inventory, and then I got to recalibrate myself in the meditation. But if I'm just doing the meditations regularly as part of my disciplines, I don't have to always recalibrate. It's kind of like going down the rabbit hole and I feel like shit, and now I got to revamp my meditations and come out of the rabbit hole and get to an even plane again, which to me is a pain in my ass. But when I look in the mirror, I'm the only one to blame, right? I can blame work, I can blame anyone, my girlfriend, I can blame anybody, but really it's me. So flipping pages, first full paragraph. There is a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taking separately, these practices bring much relief and benefit. Okay, I'm an alcoholic addict. I fucking love relief and I love benefit. And if I take these things separately, all I'm going to get is relief, and I'm going to get the self-benefit from it. And when I look at that and I unpack it, and you guys can do this in your own lives, when I was newer in recovery and I was just focused on the headline of prayer, I could pray some of these problems and they would go away. But then they would come back, and then I'm praying on these problems again. And then I'm doing more inventory and prayer, but I'm not doing any of the meditation. And a lot of these things took a long time for them to work themselves out of my life, because I was seeking the relief that I got out of the prayer and or the inventory only. And inventory can become very selfish and self-centered on its own, because there's a lot of people in this program that will focus on inventory only because they want to feel better. And yes, their intention is good, but the motive is still all about them, right? And I've learned that the hard way as well. So the direct linkage amongst all three of these things, that's what makes for this unshakable foundation. I gotta get out of the relief seeking and start identifying that's all I'm getting out of these other methods when I'm using them only when I need them. Now, practicing my disciplines of all three of these, it talks about it makes for the unshakable foundation for life. That's what I want. That's what I really want. I want an unshakable foundation for life. And what I love about this is we keep reading. Now and then we may be granted a glimpse of the ultimate reality, which is God's kingdom. And when I was explaining earlier about what I couldn't explain in words about meditation, is I've been able to source this spot in my own mind. I believe it's consciousness where I'm not even present in my own mind. I'm like gone. And I think that's what he's talking about. I'm granted this glimpse into this ultimate reality, God's kingdom. And I feel nothing but like love and peace and nothing. I'm not even present. And I've had a few like really vivid, colorful meditations where I've seen certain things in my meditations. Like one of my meditations, I was in outer space and I come up over the world and my chest pushed against the world and it squished the world like an egg as I'm coming up over it. I could see right across the world and I could see the sun behind the mountains with the clouds. Like, I'm not even joking. This was like fucking straight out of like a movie. And it was like I was actually there, man. And it was so beautiful. Another one, I had a picture of a First Nation man chief or something, and his face was like right there. And, you know, these were, you know, 10, 15, 20-minute meditations. So what I've learned for me is I need to sit for 10 minutes. And until 10-minute mark, I don't start getting into the place that I want. But it took a long time to kind of figure that out, right? And I think the earlier meditations, like the 5-minute ones, the 2-minute ones, the 8-minute ones, those ones were really valuable because it centered me in a different way. Maybe I didn't have these like hallucinations, but I was still able to ground myself and clear my mind. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a process, and you gotta go through the process. And once you hit that spot that I'm talking about, you'll see shit. And don't make that the goal though, because now you make that the goal and you're fucking resisting the nature of the meditation. And I want to share another thing. So I used to meditate with this guy who was helping me with my social media. We meditate every morning before we started work. We meditate for like 15 minutes. And then we came out of the meditations and we were talking about it. And he had a similar vision, except his was he had some eyes, like 2 eyeballs, like staring right at him in this meditation. And then what's really funny is later that day, or maybe it was the next day, we went to a sweat lodge and he hadn't ever sweated before. And after like the second round, it was really hot. So he goes outside of the sweat lodge and he lays down on the grass and he's just laying there like, you know, trying to relax and just kind of catch his breath after 2 pretty hot rounds of a sweat lodge. And there's these dogs that live at this guy's place that I know. And this one dog had come right up to him and he was like licking him in the face and sniffing him. And then my buddy opened his eyes and he's like, dude, those are the eyes. Those are the eyes that I saw in the meditation, because we were trying to figure out what eyes these were, right? But then he was like, fuck, those were them. And that's the kind of shit like you can't explain, right? It was pretty cool stuff. Anyway, so again, as we have seen, self-searching, again, there it is first. Self-searching is first again. The inventory is by the means which we can bring new vision. I have to actually see what it is that I need to work on first, right? And then the action and grace to bear upon the dark and negative side of our natures. And really, the dark and negative side of our natures, they're not to be like resisted. Like a lot of us will like really resist that stuff because our pride doesn't want to admit certain things. But as we accept those dark sides of ourselves, they're actually part of us. So learning how to like accept that shit, and that comes through meditation as well. And it comes through with some inventory, and it comes through talking with pillars and people that are doing this deal. And they make me feel okay to be me no matter what the circumstance is, even with some of this darkness and some of these crazy dark thoughts, right? But my brain wants to say, no, you can't think like that. That's fucking ludicrous. You can't have those thoughts. Well, fuck, we got to have those thoughts. That's part of the energy that is in us, right? It is a step in the development of the kind of humility that makes it possible to receive God's help. Yet it is only a step. We'll want to go further. We will want the good that is in all of us, even the worst of us, to flower and grow. And until we accept some of those dark parts of us, it won't flower and grow. And as we integrate those deep, dark parts of ourselves, we integrate that into our beings, and we can use that as ammunition in our recovery and in our service to our creator and helping people. And once we start using some of that dark shit, which I do in my recovery, and I bring it and I talk to other people, I'm like, dude, you're not alone. And one of the things that comes to mind is, you know, hiding lust in the dark corner of our minds while living within conventional bounds. And everyone has lust, man. Everyone has these thoughts and a lot of dark thoughts. And when I say, you know what, it's okay to have these thoughts, because almost every guy I've ever worked with has had them, and it's okay, man. And like, even if you're like crazy on the sexual end of things and you want somebody like that, fuck, you know what, it's okay. You don't have to be shameful of it. And there's other people out there that want that. You just got to be honest and vulnerable, and then talk to the people you're dating and fucking make that known and be honest. Because if you stay within conventional bounds and believe what you say, and then go into this relationship where you're not actually getting a lot of your needs met, it's up for a disaster later down the road, because there was so much dishonesty in this area. That's such an important part of the human experience. So I'm always, and I'll bring this shit up in my sponsorship, and it really helps people to be honest with me. You know how many guys I've worked with and or women where we talk about masturbation or whatever with no fucking issues, man. It's just another topic. It's not something to be hidden. You know, pornography, whatever it is that they're struggling with. I give them full opportunity to be open and honest about these things, because it's part of the recovery life. And for them to be okay with talking to me about it, fuck, it helps me too. And it helps them, and it allows them to become better people in their relationships when they move on. I was kind of off track, but it really wasn't. But first of all, we shall want sunlight. Nothing much can grow in the dark. Meditation is their step into the sun. How then shall we meditate? Okay, I'm going to just go over to the Lord's Prayer, okay? Over to the step 11 prayer, as it's called in the program. But before I say that prayer, I'm going to read the last sentence on the upper paragraph. He did, like us, go through the emotional ringer. And as he came out the other side of that painful experience, this prayer was his expression of what he could see, feel, and wish to become. Us alcoholics are the most extreme example of self-will run riot, but we're not the only example. And there are some normal people that have an alcoholic kind of like ego as well. Maybe St. Francis did too. It almost seems like it, right? But we go through the emotional ringer, and a lot of our thoughts create all these emotions. And this is what we're trying to calm down, right? This is really what we're trying to calm down. And through the inventory, like Jesse said, none of this can really be accomplished unless you're working a solid step 10 and keeping that channel clear, which is why in the step 10, it says we must have more action, which the next step is step 11, right? So we go into this prayer here. And what I want you to note is 2/3 of the way down the prayer, it says Lord again. So I just want you to note there's two Lords, one at the beginning and one about 2/3 of the way down on the right-hand side of the page. So I'm going to bring something really important up here that came to me a couple years ago. I don't know where Jesse is on this. I think he's probably in agreement with me, but let's see. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. So I'm asking the Lord to make me a channel, clear this channel, that where there is hatred. We're talking about self-hatred. We're talking about inside of ourselves, because most people that I've ever worked with, underneath the layers, there's a lot of self-worth issues, and there is a lot of self-hatred, okay? And maybe it's not even apparent in the first year or two, but this prayer is actually a prayer that expands your whole life, because it's a journey of healing prayer. And our whole journey of recovery is a journey of healing, and the journey of healing actually goes right till we die. So, where there's hatred, that maybe I bring love. So I'm asking for Creator's love within inside of me, where I have some self-hatred or self-doubt, right? About my own self, comparing myself to other people, not living up to what I'm supposed to be based on a lot of societal structures or whatever it might be. That where there is wrong, that I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. You know, to me, that's talking about some shame that I will create within myself. I'm asking for God where I believe that I'm wrong and where I don't live up to whatever it is that I need to live up to based in what I think, that I can bring the spirit of forgiveness and I can accept myself and be okay with that, right? That where there is discord, that I may bring harmony. Where the discord is in me, where the restless and irritable and discontent and me not feeling good or whatever it might be, just the discord, I can ask God to give me harmony in these areas. That where there's error, I may bring truth. That where I maybe mess up, based in maybe a system belief, where I go against my true nature, the God inside of me, my heart, I can bring truth, I can bring love. And I always say truth is really subjective based on the experience that you've had in your life. And everyone says, oh, I speak my truth, I speak my truth. That's great. Speaking our truth based on your experience in life may be skewed by your trauma or by belief systems or by insecurities. But once you get to the surrender of step 7 and you're like working with love and authentic self, you can actually speak the truth of love. And the truth of love actually is not you don't need to justify it, right? But truth that I had earlier in my recovery, I always had to justify my truth. But once you're good with who you are, you don't need to justify your truth anymore. And that's part of like genuine humility. It's usually, and it's always based in love. Love doesn't need to be justified, right? But fear and ego always need justification. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. Where there is the self-doubt within me, I ask God's faith. You guide me. You know, you give me your strength and courage to do whatever it is that I'm afraid to do in my own self-doubt. Maybe that's, you know, talking to a woman. Maybe that's, you know, applying for the new job. Maybe that's, you know, starting your own business. Maybe that's, it could be a billion different things. This is why conscious contact with God is so important, because he gives us the power in these moments to just act in that and move through it with his power. Because left to us, there's always a reservation. And the step 7 surrender is without reservation. We try to get to this without reservation and acting in these good ways. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. That where there are shadows, I may bring light. The shadows, the darkness, those dark parts that we were just kind of talking about, and there's many more than that, that I may bring God's light. And I don't go within myself by myself. I bring a flashlight and I bring somebody who's been there before. Going inside myself and just start rooting around, I won't be able to see what I need to see, and it's very dangerous. Where there's sadness, I may bring joy. So as I do this deep inner work over time, right? And this isn't anything that's just black and white, hard and fast lines. This whole prayer is continually being done in our lives. So now we're at the second Lord. And what this next section is like, once I've done this work to be a channel and I've cleared a lot of this guilt and the shame and self-doubt and darkness out of myself through a lot of this work that we do, prayer, meditation, inventories, then I take this out and I start doing these things. Lord, grant me that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted. So now I go out and I start comforting. One of my biggest things was I always wanted to be comforted and understood. But now it's the opposite. Why? Because I've cleared out a lot of the selfish self-centeredness, which is based in the upper 2/3 of this prayer. And it all is in the big book as we work on self and the relinquishment of self, trying to get nearer to our creator, which is love, which is the God inside of us. To understand rather than to be understood, to love rather than to be loved, for it is by self-forgetting that one finds. You know, as we talk about selfish self-centeredness, I spent my whole life going to grab, pry, snatch, and grab. The step 3 line that comes to mind is, I was a victim of the delusion that I could wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only managed it well. If I only went and took control and grabbed what it is that I thought that would make me happy. But I found through this process of like relinquishment of self, and I always like to bring this in, faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, it must be accompanied with self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Through the self-sacrifice of the top 2/3 of this prayer, and I sacrifice that in these moments through the 6 process, and becoming like more God-centered in that 7, all worked in the 10 though, I can start self-forgetting, and I can worry about you. And that unselfish constructive action is just a natural part of the process as I've cleared this channel through the work contained in the big book. For it is by forgiving that one is forgiven. And that's a big one. A lot of people have a hard time forgiving. But when you've worked and you've cleared a lot of this guilt and this shame, and you went into the dark places and you've done a lot of this work, and I'm not saying that this all happens in your first or second year again. This is over years and years. As more is revealed, as you keep a clean house, more shit comes up and you're able to deal with it. And like, again, I'll say, if you don't keep a clean house to deal with the shit as it comes up, and it will, the shit will deal with you and it will fuck up your life. It'll take you to the point of spiritual, emotional, physical bankruptcy, and you'll want to jump off a rope, or you'll pick up a drink again. So it's important to keep all of these processes, these three aspects of this prayer, meditation, and inventories, and continually work this. And we work it in a good way, because once you're over the hump into the step 7 surrender, you want more of this shit. Because even through the pain that you go through, you know that there's a fucking diamond at the end of whatever pain. And that sunlight of the spirit will shine into the dark, and you fucking grow. And a little more healing has happened. And you can become more of what's after the second Lord. And then I'll finish with this. For it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. And really, I think that's the part of this prayer that most people do kind of get. It is by self-destruction, the ego destruction, that we awaken to eternal life. And through the ego destruction, which is contained in the clearing of the channel portion of this prayer, contained in the directions in the big book, working a long-term program of action, we're able to smash more of that ego. And, I'm going to say true alignment with the personality, with God's will, and then using your personality and God's will to pack into the stream of life. That's kind of the goal, in my opinion. And everyone's got their unique assets as their personality, and they can be useful in a good way. Like, I'm still in a lot of ways the same as I was when I was a destructive addict alcoholic, but now I've used a lot of these for assets and been able to pack into the stream of life with the same traits. So they're not liabilities anymore, they're actually assets. Anyway, that's it.
Okay, so there's a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit, but when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. And so, of course, when it talks about logically interwoven, that's not so much in the directions itself, that's an actual practical application, right? And that kind of takes us back to clearing of the channel, which Bill had also chatted about in the St. Francis Prayer. He brought that up. Clearing the channel, sourcing the power, and then acting out on the intuitive thoughts that were given out of the 11. Now and then we may be granted a glimpse of that ultimate reality, which is God's kingdom. So in order to get to God's kingdom, it is all three, right? Throughout the directions, the self-examination, we're given everything we need from that. In the self-examination, we're given prayer to help guide that. Like Bill's talking about, being able to bring a flashlight with you. That flashlight is the power. That's how the self-examination is meant to be balanced. That's how we are able to accept what we find. We're able to, come to an understanding of what we find. We're able to shut that the fuck down and then carry the new lessons into tomorrow, or rectify on the spot check inventory what we need to, right? So that's the self-examination portion. We start looking at the meditation and prayer, which again, meditation as the exact same thing in the self-examination. The meditation is meant to be guided with prayer. And the prayer is to enable us to bring some sort of power into that, right? So it's not self. When these things are tainted with self, they become much, much more crooked, and the individual will be worse off than he was without it. Because really all he's doing is reveling. All he's doing is idling, marinating in self, right? And so the prayer in both cases enable us to bring the power of the flashlight, like Bill had mentioned, into the practice, and then it be able to, with the power, we're able to shut it down, we're able to move on and correct what is wrong. Only then, through those two practices and practice, the practice of packing the stream of life, I know we have emphasize a lot on sponsorship because that's where all this starts. A lot of what is given to us in working with others in the step 12 in the big book can be brought to all avenues of your life, can be brought to all your relationships, relationship with your family, co-workers, all of it, right? But where it starts is it starts in like, you know, the rooms, which is almost like an experiment on how to deal with society. You know, once you understand how to walk into a meeting, you know, maybe getting a little bit of respect to your fellows, you know, dealing with these personalities that are black and whites. I mean, you're dealing with heavy passive aggressive individuals. You're dealing with heavy grandiose individuals. You know, once you understand how to operate in that pool, then, you know, operating in a corporate setting or operating, you know, at a restaurant or whatever the case may be, you're able to carry a lot of these lessons. You're able to help society as a whole, your community as a whole, once you adopt some of these disciplines, right? So when we talk about God's kingdom, we're almost talking about different levels and different stations of life. You know, where I started when I came in here to where I am today is two totally different places. And a lot of that has to do, majority of that has to do with the ladder steps, right? Building of character and the ladder steps. And what preludes everything we're talking about is humility. I mean, without humility found in the seven and, you know, seeking humility as a deeper desire for life, without any practice of humility, then the whole thing shot, right? Without humility, I have no 10 and in turn, I have no 11 and 12. It is the step in the development of that kind of humility that makes it possible for us to receive God's help. So without humility, there is no God's help, right? And like I said previous, when it comes to the 10, there's prayer. When it comes to 11, there's prayer. This power has to be in those two steps. I can't receive God's help without humility. So when Bill talks about not fucking, you know, meditating for a week, that's a necessary part of the process, right? If I don't get a little bit of fucking pain, then ask for God's help yet again, then adhere myself to the disciplines, the process doesn't work. I can operate, you know, quite commonly, you know, if an individual is the sponsor, which is fucking rare, but if they are the sponsor, generally what you'll see is this individual will operate in 1 in 12. I just don't drink, and I take individuals to meetings and I give them 20 spots and I'll give them a pack of smokes, right? And I'll befriend this individual. Right? When we start getting into a deeper understanding of the ladder steps, because that's where we are now, the ladder steps. When I fuck up is a necessary part of the process, because it's a chink in this armor. If I think for 1 second that I operate in the ladder steps and self doesn't bleed into that, I'm fucking in a lot of goddamn trouble. Because there's going to be multiple red flags in my day that will tell me that self is starting to blend in. If you think self can't blend in to meditation and prayer, if you think it can't blend into the way I do my inventories or the way I sponsor individuals, there's something up here. And so when Bill recognizes this, that means that he's shaken awake. And I you know, it's sometimes I operate in self for a fucking solid couple weeks. You know, sometimes I operate in self for a fucking day and I'm able to rectify it right away and get back on track. But, you know, without exception, I will operate in self. How long am I going to operate in self tells me where my growth is, right? Am I going to operate in self for a week, right? And then be shaken away? Because that's really what's happening is I'm idling. I already brought this up previous, but I'm like a car. I'm just idling in the fucking driveway. I'm not moving anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, right? And it's only until the tank runs out of gas or I blow a seal and there's oil all on the driveway, then I look at that like, oh, holy fuck, okay, you know what, just or something, you know, definitely bringing the meditation, definitely bringing a couple more things here, you know. And so for me, and even for Bill, I know this is the case, It's not like Bill has just burnt his life down to the ground and then he's come to the realization. You know, he's like, I'm a little off. That's the realization. I'm a little off. And even for myself, you know, it's like, you know what, dude, like, where the fuck were you today? You know what I mean? You were off here, you know, buddy was talking to you, didn't, you know, and then it's not like I've just lost my job, come to the realization, because that's what the fuck it was, by the way. The first number of years, it's like, oh, fuck. It's like, oh, fuck, I'm homeless now. Or, oh, you know, and this is a year sober, or wow, I just lost that job. Let's backtrack that. And in turn, I idled for months, right?
Remember that time we were working out of town and you got a pretty good position, and then I had a wage review, and then you were going to get a wage review, and you went in there fucking like playing the big shot, and then you got skidded.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, well, I was going to go in there and ask for more money because that's what I believed. And he's like, we're not giving you more money. You're fucking fired. I do remember that. But that's self. That is, when this prayer talks about self-forgetting one finds, I want to take it to the St. Francis prayer. So he talks about hatred, he talks about discord, error, doubt, despair, shadows, and sickness. Based in self, that is where I idle. I idle in hatred. I idle in discord within myself, error within myself, doubt within myself, despair within myself, shadows within myself, and sadness within myself. Just as a byproduct of that, though, I bleed that to every person that I come in contact with. And it's actually really funny. I'll give you an example of this. So at work, when I'm confronted with an issue or I'm confronted with something I don't necessarily like or some sort of problem or whatever, I think that out, but I live action think that out. I will talk that out. And, you know, there's going to be discord in that. There's going to be error in that. There's probably going to be some doubt in that. And what I do is I bleed that to the office, eh? To me, it's not much of a problem. You know, yeah, it's a problem right now, but I'm thinking through it. When I think through it and I talk to them, I don't ever give them a solution, eh? So their solution is accounts have been lost. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. And then I naturally come to a solution around that, but I leave them with the problem. Eh? And so this was brought up to me where they're like, Jess, you know, you got to stop fucking thinking out loud here because you're disturbing the whole office. And that is because it's not so much that I'm disturbed. That's just my process. And that is God-centered. I do that. God-centered, just my way of thinking, can bring about error, can bring about discord, and can bring about doubt in these guys. Could you imagine if I was full-blown alcoholic, I would not have this job. That's first and foremost. But if I were to flip like a fucking dime right now, these guys would probably throw me out of the fucking office like that. Get the fuck out of here. On self, that's how I operate. It is by self-forgetting that one finds. That is fucking everything as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I can almost just say that and walk away. It is by self, it is by me forgetting self, what I want, my needs, my doubt, my error, my hatred. When I forget a lot of that only then am I able to pack into the stream of life. And of course it's not that easy. Like, you have to remember that you have read the big book, you are a 12-step member, you have read the 12 and 12 all the way up to here. Then we chat about this, right? So it is by this very process of a lot of things that we've chatted about previous that I am able to forget about my needs, what I want. All of that has been taken care of. A lot of my base necessities almost within the first couple months of being sober, we're taken care of. The problem is I'm not interested ever in base necessities. I'm interested in, a better way of life, living beyond my means. That's what I'm interested in self. And like Bill had chatted about when we talk about, the delusion, one of the delusions that we can
Rest satisfaction.
Rest, satisfaction, and happiness out of this world if we only manage them. And when we talk about rest, that is not, again, to idle. That is not to lay back and take it easy. That is to take. We are to take that. So in saying that, when I forget a lot of that, when I forget a lot of my needs and a lot of my wants, my hand to fucking Christ, I get a lot of my needs met and then some. And this isn't the first time we're chatting about this. This is not the first time that this is introduced. In fact, this was already introduced in step 7. Page 71, step 7. In all our striving, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap had been our lack of humility. We had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first, and that the material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. Quite characteristically, we had gone all out in confusing the ends with the means, instead of regarding the satisfactions of our material desires as the means by which we could live and function as human beings. We had taken these satisfactions to be the final end and aim of life. So in this case, instead of regarding my needs, my wants, and the material world, and the needs and wants in that material world to be the final end and aim of my life, I have resorted to character building, right? And so up to this point, that's what we've been doing, is that we have essentially given, like I gave up on the material world in early recovery. I just could not entertain it. No matter what I did in the material world, I was always going to be behind the 8 ball. I buy a car, somebody always has a better car. I get a job, somebody always has a better job. If I am to compete in that area, I am to be shafted. No matter what, even when my whole life was based on the material, I had no material. Just by the very character of me, and the hatred, the discord, the error, the doubt, the despair, the shadows, and the sadness. No matter what in the material world, I would always be fucking lost. So if I am to work on character building and spiritual values first, then as a byproduct of that, I am to be getting all I need and then some. And only then am I actually able to self-forgive and find. And what I am finding is the reality of God's kingdom. What I am finding is a presence and a serenity in my life. And with that, from there, I am able to give everything that I have. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. All right, page 99. As beginners in meditation, we might now reread this prayer several times very slowly, savoring every word and trying to take in a deep meaning of each phrase and idea. It will help if we could drop all resistance to what our friend says. For a meditation, debate is no place. We rest quietly with the thoughts of someone who knows, so that we may experience and learn. As though lying on a sunlit beach, let us relax and breathe deeply in the spiritual atmosphere with which the grace of this prayer surrounds us. Let us become willing to partake and be strengthened and lifted up by the sheer spiritual power, beauty, and love of which these magnificent words are the carriers. Let us now look upon the sea and ponder what its mystery is. And let us lift up our eyes to the far horizons by which we shall seek all those wonders that still unseen. Shucks, says somebody, this is nonsense. It isn't practical. When such thoughts break in, we might recall a little ruefully how much store we used to set by imagination as it tried to create realities out of bottles. Yes, we reveled in this sort of thinking, didn't we? And though sober nowadays, don't we often try to do much the same thing? Perhaps our trouble was not we used our imagination, not that we used our imagination. Perhaps the real trouble was the almost total inability to point imagination toward the right objectives. There's nothing the matter with constructive imagination. All sound achievement rests upon it. After all, no man can build a house until he first envisions a plan for it. Well, meditation is like that too. It helps envision our spiritual objective before we try to move toward it. So let's get back to the sunlit beach or the plains or the mountains if you prefer. When by such simple devices, we have placed ourselves in a mood in which we can focus undisturbed on constructive imagination, we might proceed like this. Once more, we read our prayer and again try to see what its inner essence is. We'll think about the man who first uttered the prayer. First of all, he wanted to become a channel. Then he asked for the grace to bring love, forgiveness, harmony, truth, faith, hope, light, and joy to every human being he could. Next came the expression of an aspiration and a hope for himself. He hoped, God willing, that he might be able to find some of these treasures too. This he would try to do by what he called self-forgetting. What did he mean by self-forgetting, and how did he propose to accomplish that? He thought it better to comfort than to receive it, better to understand than to be understood, better to forgive than be forgiven.
Okay, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. So on page 100, it talks about as though lying upon a sunlit beach, let us relax and breathe deeply of the spiritual atmosphere which the grace of this prayer surrounds us. Let's become willing to partake in the strength and lifted up by the sheer spiritual power, beauty, love, which these magnificent words are the carriers. Let us look upon the sea and ponder the mystery, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and then it goes into the next paragraph, and basically what it's saying is it's talking about picture the deep and meaningful sense of what your life can be. Use your imagination in the prayer and meditation. Try not to let self bleed in, because self will bleed in, the doubt will bleed in, but try to redouble your efforts and really think of what you want your life to be. And picture these things. Picture the interaction with people in a kind and loving way. Picture maybe conflict and how you handle it. Picture everything through your imagination. And like when we go back to the step 11 in the big book, talks about on awakening, we think about the 24 hours ahead. So we're thinking about the 24 hours ahead. We're envisioning how our day may go. We're kind of playing out the day and picturing us in indecision and then asking God for his intuitive thoughts and strength and whatever it is. So this is all about like using your imagination to picture, basically manifest what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your new life. So again, on page 101, I'm just going to go right across. Once more, we read our prayer and again try to see what its inner essence is. We'll think now about the man who uttered the first prayer. First of all, he wanted to become a channel. Then he asked for the grace to bring love and forgiveness, harmony, truth, faith, hope, light, and joy to every human being he could. So this is all in the imagination and asking and praying and trying to become what this is. And through the processes of your regular program, doing your inventories, your prayers, your meditation, trying to work your way through the step 6 defects of character and kind of get over these hurdles and work in a different plane, which is that step 7 humility, we keep praying and using our imagination. Next came the expression of an inspiration and hope for himself. He hoped, God willing, he might be able to find some of these treasures too. This he would try to do by what he called self-forgetting. What did he mean by self-forgetting, and how did he propose to accomplish that? He thought it better to give comfort than to receive it, better to understand than to be understood, better to forgive than to be forgiven. So again, as we do our regular disciplines of inventory, relinquishment of self, that self-sacrifice, and it is a process, we can kind of bring it back to what we're doing here. We're asking to be self-forgetting, and naturally through these self-sacrificing processes of the 10, we do become unselfish, constructive action. Remember back in the doctor's opinion, it talked about we work out our solution on the spiritual and altruistic plane. The solution to my life lies within these spiritual disciplines that we're talking about, the direct linkage of these three aspects, and then becoming altruistic. And part of that journey is doing the altruistic actions, manifesting more altruism, and eventually, as we relinquish more self, we become altruistic. And we are acting in love and kindness and joy without reservation. And then we're walking hand in hand with our Creator. And then understanding that we're not just going to be fucking saints. We're still going to have these desires that oppose the grace of God. We're always going to have these little hurdles and these roadblocks that, you know, it's going to be our wants and our what we want. But we're going to have to work through those things. But more and more as we practice the disciplines, altruistic action, and like Jesse stressed it many times tonight, the biggest growth I've ever had in this program, the 12 steps can give you a lot, but the 12th step, working with others, will give you everything. And when we talk about inventory, there's so much inventory that's actually subtle and behind the scenes through working with others, because you're looking at yourself, talking to yourself, listening to yourself. You're reflecting on your own life. You're sharing some of these painful and black and dark experiences, and you're starting to heal, and you're using these as tools for your own healing. And sponsorship is the gold, man. And people miss out on it. And it's the most important piece. And through that altruistic action down the road, these spiritual disciplines just become part of your daily life. And then you want to sponsor, because like the step 12 says, you know, it's an experience you don't want to miss. And you really don't, because through that self-forgetting, you find, what do you find? You find yourself. What else do you find? That authentic self, that truth based in love that doesn't need to be justified anymore. And you find everything you ever looked for by wresting satisfaction and happiness out of this world by going and taking it, selfishly grabbing for whatever it is with more pleasures that are possible or due you. And we find, right? And I'll finish with this. This all just reminds me of the one line in Bill's story, where it talks about, never was I to pray for myself, except how my requests bore on my usefulness to others. Then I may expect to receive, and that would be in great measure. And that's the experience that I've had in this. So, and I don't want to stop. It just pulls me along. And it's actually opened up a new career path for me, which I don't even consider a new career path. It's purpose path. And a lot of people in our world, they're stuck with, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? You know, I'll take a quote out of Jordan Peterson's library. And he says, if you want to find purpose in your life, then everything you do has meaning. Through living your life with everything having a meaning and a deep and meaningful sense to bring some joy and love and compassion to other people, the purpose of your life, it lies within that. And learning through the experiences of your own life, circumstances made him willing to believe. Through every circumstances, you will be able to navigate and heal a little bit with the help of God. It's that last page of We Agnostics. What is this but a miracle of healing? Circumstances made him willing to believe. It's the circumstances, if you're willing to believe that God can help you, that you will have the miracle of healing. And then he humbly offered himself to his maker. Then he knew. What did he know? He knew that everything's going to be okay. And all that other shit that we thought matters, the world of the material, like Jesse said, it's these spiritual values and character building have to come first. That the material satisfactions are not the purpose and end aim of life, which I made them, but I still wasn't happy. Through self-forgetting and doing a lot of this work, it's gold. That's it.
Okay. So bottom of page 99, going to page 100, for a meditation, debate has no place. And debate and meditation is essentially like self-bleeding it, right? Where, you know, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to do in that day, right? Like in the morning, I'm going through in the morning and I run into that indecision and I start coming up with answers immediately to that indecision, the odds are that's self. The debate only happened, I think, when I first started meditation. Debate doesn't even come in nowadays. What about you?
Very rare.
Very rare. Debate fucking ends when you start getting some benefits out of meditation. Then the debate is over. The only debate that I would get in is like, kind of thinking this is fucking lame. I got better things to do. It would only be debate on meditation that I have better shit to do. A lot of the things that turned me off from meditation was shit like this. As though laying on a sunlit beach, let's now relax and breathe in deeply in the spiritual atmosphere with which the grace of this prayer surrounds us all the way at the bottom. Let's now look upon the sea and ponder what its mystery is, and let us lift our eyes to the far horizons by which we shall seek all those wonders still unseen. That type of shit turned me immediately off from meditation, that kind of talk. I could even bristle with antagonism around that shit today. I love this piece I love. Bill builds it up to such a point where, if you haven't done meditation or you're think it's a little lame, whatever, you're meant to read that and say, what the fuck are we talking about? Because right after that, he says, shucks, says somebody, this is nonsense, right? He's built it and crafted it in such a way that as it's written, you think to yourself, holy fuck, that sounds pretty lame. There's other words I would use for that, but I'm not going to use in this. But that word keeps on coming in the back of my mind. Anybody I've sponsored would know the word that I'm fucking. Anyways, moral of the story is that that's the point, right? And that type of shit for me was not practical. That type of conversation I would shut off immediately. And what that is that's hard and fast lines on what I believe prayer was and prayer wasn't. And I don't believe I'm unique in that at all. In fact, I believe majority of the men, at least that I've worked with, have the same feelings. That they're thinking, if this is what this is, I don't believe I could ever get it. I believe that this is what this could be. I'm not necessarily going to say that this is what it should be in growth in meditation. But where I start with meditation is extremely practical. I'm not the guy who's going to grow a ponytail, listen to whales music, grab a fucking meditation pillow, and smack a gong. And I actually, in some respects, still have some disdain for that kind of stuff. For myself and for the guys that I work with, it had to be extremely practical. It had to be something that I say that I do it this way, and he says to himself, fuck, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do it that way. That makes sense to me. That sounds like it's almost practical. That sounds like, fuck, if he could have this, then maybe I could have this too, right? And I'm not going to bleed my own convictions, especially in the latter steps, to the guys that I work with and potentially turn them off. Even if I do grow the ponytail and start using the pillow, I would never bleed that onto a man that I work with or an individual that I work with, right? Because although I've taken it to my own little space, if I always take it back to the disciplines, which I am always sponsoring, so I'm always in the original blueprints and disciplines, that tells me that we don't have to start there. Wherever the fuck he goes with it, whatever, right? And like I said, so this would be pretty far advanced, right? Like even Bill's sharing some of his experience through meditation. That's far advanced, right? That would be like, I would bring those conversations up to, an individual I've been working with maybe a year. He's been 12-step for a couple months or maybe a year, and we start getting into some deeper conversations. Then we would have those conversations. But with a new guy, I wouldn't bring fucking any of that up. I mean, we have the opportunity to scare these guys off in regards to God and in regards to spirituality and the world of the spirit. And so we're going to want to keep it as practical and as tangible as possible as we take these individuals through the first set of steps. Once they're 12-step, they have experience and they're growing in this, then floodgates are open. Perhaps the real trouble was our total inability to appoint imagination toward the right objectives. So what Bill's talking about is, yes, that, you know, somebody says that this is nonsense, the sunlit beach, right? But does not this man use his, you know, imagination for fucking pomp and worship of other things? Does he not dream about flying on jets or getting that, you know, promotion, or walking into the office and telling everybody to fuck himself? I've never met an individual who has not imagined walking into the office and saying, fuck you and fuck you, I'm out of here, I'm better than this, right? So at least in that respect, and maybe even in other respects, this individual uses his imagination for everything, right? But now we're talking about using his imagination for something that is positive, using his imagination for something that is constructive, and he calls it nonsense. It's not imagination. It's the way that we've used our imagination up to this point. Much like we've chatted about in We Agnostic, where the man has the ability to have faith, to have love and worship. He has the ability to do those things. It's just misguided, so is imagination. It's misguided for pomp and worship of other things. That's pretty well about it.
Okay.
Okay, this much could be a fragment of what is called meditation. Perhaps our first attempt at a mood, a flare into the realm of the spirit, if you like. It ought to be followed by a good look at where we stand now, and a further look at what might happen in our lives were we able to move closer to the ideal we've been trying to glimpse. Meditation is something which can always be further developed. It has no boundaries, either of width or height. Aided by such instruction and example as we can find, it is essentially an individual adventure, something which each one of us works out in his own way. But its object is always the same: to improve our conscious contact with God, with his grace, wisdom, and love. And let's always remember that meditation is in reality intensely practical. One of its first fruits is emotional balance. With it, we can broaden and deepen the channel between ourselves and God as we understand him. Now, what about prayer? Prayer is the raising of the heart and mind to God. And in this sense, it includes meditation. How may we go about it? And how does one fit it in with meditation? Prayer is commonly understood as a petition to God. Having opened our channel as best we can, we try to ask for those right things of which we and others are in the greatest need. And we think that the whole range of our needs is well defined by that part of step 11, which says, knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. A request for this fits in any part of our day. In the morning, we think of the hours to come. Perhaps we think of our day's work and the chances it may afford us to be helpful, useful and helpful, or of some special problem that it may bring. Possibly today we'll see a continuation of a series of a serious and yet unresolved problem left over from yesterday. Our immediate temptation will be to ask for specific solutions to specific problems and for the ability to help other people as we have already thought that they should be helped. In that case, we're asking God to do it our way. Therefore, we ought to consider each request carefully to see what its real merit is. Even so, when making specific requests, it will be well to add to each one of them this qualification, if it be thy will. We ask simply that throughout the day, God place us in the best understanding of his will that we could have for that day, and that we be given the grace by which we can be given the grace by which we may carry it out.
Okay, I'll make it short and sweet again. So back to 101, bottom paragraph. About 5 lines down, it talks about closer to the ideal we've been trying to get a glimpse. So like as new people, and maybe some of you guys, and you know, there's guys that I look up to in meditation where I really want what they're telling me that the experience is, right? And even based on some of my own experience of what I've had, I want that glimpse again. So we're trying to get this glimpse. It's kind of like a hope of something really cool that maybe we can get to as well. he talks about in the next line that it's further developed, right? It's always further developed. And I think I emphasize that based on my first year recovery all the way to my 7th and a bit year recovery here today on how that's grown. Talks about the individual adventure. And it's an individual adventure. Like as we get into our own meditations and we start doing this, it's a pretty cool adventure, man. Getting that connection, getting out of our own self, getting into a place where we're not even present in the room that we're in, we're present somewhere else. It's kind of an adventure. But its object is always the same, to improve conscious contact with God. That is it. To improve our ability to carry out step 6 and 7, to learn through the pains of the 6 and relinquish these defects, and then to work in that 7 of surrender and pack into the stream of life, you know, the good shit. And then on page 102, the first fruits of the step is emotional balance. I think that is the first fruits, but it's on a small scale of emotional balance. The mind starts quieting, you start feeling different, and you don't even really know why you're feeling different. Like this is kind of the benefit of being able to stay sober longer. You can connect the dots together to go, today, my emotional balance rests on the hinges of my meditation. And if I'm not doing the meditation, there's a guarantee that self bleeds back in, and then I'm starting to get emotionally disturbed, and the thoughts and the channel's not clear anymore. So emotional balance is basically the biggest fruit. And then there's another big fruit. It allows me to be of maximum service. There's a calmness that meditation produces that allows you to be more intuitive and present and be able to be helpful in these moments without actually like calling on it. It just kind of downloads into your life. I'm going to go down to the bottom, about 3/4 of the way down the page. And for the ability to help other people, as we have already thought, they should be helped. In that case, we are asking God to do it our way. Therefore, we ought to consider each request carefully to see what its real merit is. And what it's saying is sometimes we can have a selfish prayer and thinking we know what's best for other people. And so I've learned this out of this 12 and 12, that if I pray for people, then I always qualify it, if it be thy will, because I actually don't know what's best for other people. And, you know, like my brother, he's in active addiction and I don't know what his journey is. You know, I can pray for him, if it be thy will, that he gets well and he finds the light and fucking tries something different. Maybe his journey of life just isn't that. Maybe his journey of life is he's got to go this way, and then maybe he comes back in another lifetime, in another body, and he continues to learn his lessons. And that's one of my beliefs, is we're continually coming back here to learn the lessons. And I think, you know, like Jesse's a good example. Like he's a 26-year-old guy. I've known him for about 6 years, but everyone's always thought this guy's 40 fucking years old. And I remember when he was 21 and I ID'd him, I said, how old are you anyway? He's like 21. And I'm like, bullshit. And I fucking asked him for his ID and he showed me his ID, right? This guy drives fucking old Cadillacs. He drives a newer one, but it's kind of still old. But he used to own a 76? And the guy was 21 owning a 76 Cadillac, listening to like 1950s and 60s music. Like this guy had come from another life, been placed back on earth, and is learning the journey of his own healing through this experience in his life, is what I believe. And you've met the people that seem like they're old souls, right? And it's like they've lived another time. And sometimes maybe through these meditations, maybe when I saw that Indian guy, maybe that was a reflection of another life. Who knows? But this is part of the adventure. It gets pretty cool, right? And the last thing I think I'd like to highlight here is, you know, in the middle of 102, it talks about in the morning, we think of the hours to come. Essentially, it's talking about that step 11 on awakening. And that's it.
Okay. It's actually 28. But
oh, you're 28.
That's true. Bill did card me. How old do you think I was? Fucking
dude, I thought you were like 38.
He thought I was fucking his age. That's what he thought.
I called my buddy right then and there, and I'm like, dude, do you know how old Jesse? I called Randy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you know how old Jesse is? He's like, yeah, 38, 40. I'm like, no, dude, he's fucking 21. He's like, no fucking way. And then I've had sponsees come to me, your sponsees, saying, why does Jesse lie to me about his age? I'm like, what are you talking about? He told me he was like 23 or whatever. And I'm like, dude, he's 23. So they think you're lying to them, right?
That's funny. It's actually funny because I went out to dinner for work last night, and the general manager of 3 of our business units came down, and we were kind of shooting the shit a little bit, and he actually knows my age. So he asked me, he's like, why the fuck do you drive Cadillacs? Right. And so I give him the spiel, but I laugh though, because I told him, I said, we actually know my age. Most people, they see me driving a Cadillac, they're like, yeah, he's, X amount of years old. He likes Cadillacs, makes sense. Right. But it was funny. He asked me because he knew my age. It's like, why the fuck are you driving Cadillacs? You're like 20 some odd years old. Right. Kind of funny. Okay. When we talk about, so 101, we're talking about that last paragraph, boundaries, width and height. We're talking about using the instructions as an example. Really what we're talking about, what I call this is like live action meditation, which is contemplation. This is all I call it. And so from time to time, it's actually quite often that I will do this, somebody says something, or I find, out new information, or maybe even fucking lyrics in a song, and I'll contemplate that. Whatever comes out of that contemplation, it doesn't go south though. So like the greatest example I have of this is a little bit more recent. A couple months ago, I'm driving and I'm contemplating mortality, and I'm contemplating my own mortality, and eventually everybody dies and these types of things. And I wasn't sick over it, right? I was able to contemplate that because, like we just recently had a death in the family not too long ago, and there's a lot of things that came out of that. Emotions were high, and I was contemplating this again just a couple months ago. And, I didn't get sick with it. I wasn't in fear about it. I wasn't thinking to myself, what's the point in these types of ideas? I was able to contemplate it. I was able to come to a little bit more realizations around it. I was able to shut it the fuck down and move on with my day, right? And so with the St. Francis prayer and being able to contemplate aspects of that through a meditation, that is what is to bring you to the sunlit beach. And through there, the meditation can be, the dimensions of it can be whatever the fuck you want, right? So I just don't want you to take that part as it's separate. That part is to build up to what the fuck we've been talking about. Most important though, is when we chat about the emotional balance on 102, okay? You're not going to sell anybody on meditation, talking about God's reality, the fucking realm of the spirit, talking about the sunlit beach. Those aren't the selling points. It's the same as, when we talk about the realm of the spirit and we talk about this power, we talk about God, this power. We talk about the need of that power to rectify alcoholism. That's the main sell. The main sell of this power is not that it's going to help you, in your life, or even give you serenity, or a lot of the things that we've chatted about in the latter steps. That's not the fucking sell. But you find that a lot in the rooms. I hear that a lot, that the main sell on this power is that, it helps me in my marriage, or it helps me in my career, or whatever. And, whenever that was the main sale, I wasn't able to ever capture it there. I was only able to capture this power in regards to death. If that makes any sense. I will fucking die due to alcoholism. Only then am I low enough. My pride is low enough. I am humble enough in order to grab this. Right? So latter steps, being 12 step, going back into this, eventually the individual is going to understand that without meditation, there is no emotional balance. There's no fucking way this individual is getting emotional balance. Then that will be the sell of meditation. Right? The sell of God is you will fucking die. The sale of meditation is emotional balance. Having this thing run all day, being 12 step, trying to sponsor guys. trying to keep something of serenity. The prayer eventually doesn't hold up. They have no growth in the spirit, right? And then in turn, with all that mess, emotional balance will be the next sale in regards to meditation. God, to have it our way. Even so, we're making specific requests, and we'll be well to add to each one of them this qualification, if it be thy will. This was a little bit more for early prayer. I mean, my early prayer was mostly self-dominated. And I would add that, my prayers today, very rarely do they have anything to do with myself. I can't think of the last time I prayed about myself. Why that is because I find that when I self-forget, like self-forgetting is almost putting these things on the back burner, all these problems. I understand that they will eventually come to a head. It's not going to be as devastating as it looks right now. This power will take care of it. It'll work out any which way. And as long as I'm not emotionally attached to the outcome, then I'm okay. As soon as I get emotionally attached to any outcome, that's really where self will step in and try and justify accesses, right? Try and justify the means to an end. So as long as when I forget, it's not that I don't care about the situations or I do no action and I think that God's just going to take care of it. That's not all. I mean, I make my demonstration. I do my part. I do as much as I can for that situation. And then I leave it up to the power, whatever it may be. But from that time to the time I get an answer on it, I mean, I don't marinate in it. That's the problem, right? Like if I am to marinate in these things, it is to leave me miserably unaffected. So I deal with these situations. Like I say, I put as much action as I possibly can. The outcome is now in God's hands. Then I pack into the stream of life from the time I've let it go to the time I get an answer. And that when we talk about self-forgetting, that's more what I'm trying. It's the absence of self. All my meditations have to do with the absence of self. When Bill talks about 6 and 7, in regards to meditation, that's really what he's talking about. So I have to make sure that if I am to have a business meeting, or if I am to see a sponsee, or if I am to take a family call, whatever the circumstance may be, I want to make sure that self is not involved in that. And with that, that is all I have to say. Is there any questions?
Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at Billwardlife to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.